Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Beyond Sports Science podcast. My name is Arthur Lynch. I'm a PhD student at the University of Limerick. I'm a powerlifter, a coach, and all-round strength training enthusiast. And joining me as always is my partner in crime, David Nolan.
Thank you, Arthur. And yes, welcome back to this ad hoc podcast series, I should say, that is designed to help and inform current graduates, sports science students, strength and conditioning students, or anyone who may be thinking of going into a career. And it is, as I said, an ad hoc podcast where we come on every couple of months to discuss relevant and topical issues in the employment landscape and career development for sports scientists and strength and conditioning. And for anyone who's not familiar with me, as Arthur said, I am David Nolan, PhD student at DCU, Director of Education at Rugby Academy Ireland, and founder of Synapse Performance, and general freelance sports science consultant. So it is a pleasure to once again be back on the show, Arthur.
Yeah, it's been a while, probably too long. But I think once COVID-19 happened and we were all sort of thrown into lockdown, it was sort of one of those things where I don't know about having sports science podcasts right now. So my stance on that has softened a little bit since, and I guess I'm interested to talk to you about this topic today, because you've done some fantastic work, David, and I think you should be acknowledged for it.
Well, yeah, I'd be more gratuitous of the people that filled in the survey. So what we are going to discuss today is the current employment landscape for strength and conditioning and sports science students and graduates in Ireland. So what I did is tried to be somewhat productive through the lockdown, and I was fortunate enough to be part of some CPD groups, I suppose you'd call it, a collective gathering of strength and conditioning coaches and sports scientists working in Ireland. And I sent out a survey asking people about their income, work conditions, their employment history, and just all around their current employment situation. And I got 92 people to respond to that. And these people were all Irish sports scientists and strength and conditioning coaches who say that sports science or working in sport is their full-time gig, essentially. And I got some really high quality respondents. We have people that, are freelance, just work with individual athletes in GA teams in Ireland, right up to those working at the highest level in the Premier League. So it's a really good, varied demographic that replied and gave us a good idea of what the situation on the ground is and what it's like for coaches in the trenches in Ireland at the moment.
Okay, so maybe we'll start with, I suppose, what sort of data you wanted to be able to collect from this, or what sort of information you wanted to glean from it, and what questions did you ask the participants?
Sure. So essentially what I wanted to get was a snapshot of what the employment landscape is like in Ireland, as in we are constantly asked questions from prospective students and parents of, are there jobs in sports science? If someone goes in and does a degree in sports science, in strength and conditioning, whatever it may be, are there jobs out the far side? And that's a question that we often get asked. And anecdotally, we can probably be sometimes negative and say, it's tough. It's tough out there to get a job, to get full-time employment and to make a sustainable living from working in these areas. But with no real hard data. We have quite a bit of data in the UK from the BASES report is the prominent one. And that is very stark reading. If you're a sports science graduate in the UK, chances are you're not going to make a sustainable living, and more than likely you're going to be forced out of the industry very quickly. So I wanted to just collect some data to see whether the same was for Ireland. So the type of questions I asked around employment was, what's the nature of your position? Are you in full-time employment? Do you have a part-time job, or is it multiple part-time roles? How much money do you make annually? What's your annual income? Ratings of satisfaction. I asked people how satisfied on a scale of 0 or for a scale of 1 not satisfied, 0/1 not satisfied at all, up to 5 fully satisfied in things like financial security, job security, work conditions, quality of life, satisfaction, job satisfaction, these areas. And then I asked some questions around how they came into the current position, how were they recruited, just to give people an idea of how people actually achieve their jobs in sports science. So really a brief snapshot of what it's like to be a sports scientist or strength and conditioning trying to make a living in Ireland.
Right. So as regards the results, where would be the best place to start there?
Yeah, so I suppose I'll go through it systematically. I have laid it all out in an in-depth report on my website, synapseperformance.ie. But if we systematically go through that, and I suppose the first question we want to answer is employment status. What are people in employment? Now, what I will say, and people need to understand, we produce hundreds, if not thousands of graduates across strength and conditioning, sports science and health, sport and exercise science, whatever it may be across the country each year. When I put out this survey, I asked people, anyone who is a sports scientist or strength and conditioning coach to reply. That inherently brings a selection bias that only people who've been fortunate enough to actually make a career and be working full-time in sport are likely to reply. If you had done a sports science degree and then went off to, work in Amazon, in the business, you went off to work in retail, those people didn't respond. So this only accounts for graduates who have come out and actually secured work in the area. So what I will say is I had 92 respondents, but there are hundreds, if not thousands, each year who graduate with a sports science degree do not go into the sports science industry. They rather will go on and do a master's in physiotherapy to go into that area, or they will completely change tack and go into retail or business or some other area. So what I'm concerned with here are the people that have actually been fortunate enough, in inverted commas, to actually go and get a job in this industry. So of those 92 that replied, about half, with 45%, are employed in a single full-time position. A quarter of people have multiple full-time or multiple part-time jobs that add up to a full-time position. So not just one role, it could have 2 or 3 different S&C or sports science roles that add up to a full-time position. And the rest really are either in part-time employment in a single position or freelance self-employed and work that way with private clients and teams. Now, what I did find interesting is that the majority of people that replied are technically or close to full employment in sport. But over half of people that replied, when I asked, are you currently happy in your role? Over half of people said they are not happy in their current role and are actively seeking other job opportunities. So we already know that it's quite difficult anecdotally to get a job in sport. But those people who have a job in sport, over half of them are not happy with the job they have and are actively trying to get another job and secure. We had only 4 out of 10 people say that they are happy and content in the role and not trying to secure another job at the moment.
And just on that point, in those that are unhappy and presumably seeking employment elsewhere, would you say that that's down to working conditions, the less than favorable finances? Are they, what do you think are the reasons for that?
Again, and I want to do this in a follow-up report and dig a bit deeper into that and look for those connections, because in this initial report, everything was completely descriptive. I didn't look for correlates as such. I just described everything without statistical analysis, just in descriptive nature. But just eyeballing the data, it doesn't seem to boil down to any of those per se, as in people. There's an even proportion of people in terms of those who are happy and those who are not happy pretty much make the same money. They have the same work conditions. I think it's very much, it seems, and just eyeballing data, how long people are in the industry. It seems people who are, say, in the first 5 years or less are, they're actively looking for something else. And I think just looking at the data, without examining it in depth, it very much seems to be that these people are chasing the dream, still chasing the dream, and maybe haven't come to the realization of what the reality is of the industry, that they think, if I get this gig, I'll be happy then. If I just get in with that team or organization, then I'll be in the money, then I'll be happy. Where people who are of a bit more longevity in the industry seem to maybe not prioritize the financial stuff as much and are just happy to be in a role and to be working and have the privilege of working with these athletes. Because again, it's evenly distributed. Neither of them seem to be making more money than the other, but just the people who are happy in the role seem to have more job satisfaction while having the same level of job security and financial security. So maybe it's just a perspective thing. But again, I want to dig a bit more into the data to see whether we can tease out some of those relationships. Because when we look at income, that's for me, that was the most stark finding of the report, is the annual income. Because yes, people say money isn't everything, but you still have to pay the bills. You want to have a mortgage. You want to do all these things. And especially if you're working in professional sport, you're usually working in a major city or a residential area where rents are higher, house prices are higher, and cost of living is generally higher. So when we looked at the data, we see that 65% of people earn less than 30,000 per year. And at that, 12% of people earn less than 10,000 euro a year. A further 10% between 10 and 15,000, 12% between 15 and 20, and another 12% between 20 and 25. So if you quickly add that up, 46% are earning less than 25,000 per year. Now, to put that in perspective, 100% pretty much, I think everyone bar one person in this survey has an undergraduate degree. So they've gone through 4 years of college. 60% of these people have either a master's or a PhD degree. So you're talking the majority of people here, 60% of people have spent either 5 or 6 years minimum paying for third level education, getting themselves educated at that level. So 60% are at that, where you have well over 50% earning less, you have 65% earning less than 30,000 per year. If you came straight out of school and went to work as a retail assistant in Aldi, say, for example, you're straight in at, I think, 24,000 a year. So you have well over a third of these people that have spent 4 to 6 years in college and earn less than what they would have earned if they went straight in working in a retail job just straight out of college. And when you take into account if they had spent that 4 or 6 years working their way up through the retail, they're probably then at a manager level or supervisor where they're earning 30, 40,000 plus, where we found that 85% of people here earn less than 40,000 per year. Now, the average industrial wage in Ireland in 2019 was 39,000 euro. So that's for the average person, working on a building site, working in an office, working wherever it may be, probably jobs that didn't require the same level of education or internships or whatever it may be, people are earning. So you got to ask the question, is that level of education warranted or necessary if it's not reflected in the value that society or organization places upon these professionals? So that is a very stark finding for me. If you look, we only have 15% of people earning more than 40,000 per year in terms of their annual income. And unfortunately, if you want to live in Ireland and get a mortgage in any major city in Ireland, if you're not earning at least 40,000 per year or above, arguably it's going to be very difficult for you to secure a mortgage and live in any of the major cities.
That's probably the finding that's probably hardest to kind of stand over as, like, if you like, ambassadors for sports science, isn't it?
It very much is. And it makes the argument of whether you should forge a career full-time in sports science and strength and conditioning. I think it does raise the question where technically you can get qualified as a strength and conditioning coach without getting a degree. You can go get these qualifications. And if that's something you want to do, are you better off securing full-time employment in a different industry and doing strength and conditioning or your sports science stuff as a side gig? You know what I mean? It's not unheard of for people to be teachers 9 to 5 and then be strength and conditioning coaches or data analysts or GPS analysts or whatever for clubs and teams and organizations in the evenings and weekends. Vice versa, you have people that, are very good with numbers and are analytical, that they like the sports science and the data analysis side. but they use that data analysis skills in accountancy firms, in multinational companies and corporations, and then do the strength and conditioning on the side. So that gives you a cushion that you'll likely make 40, 50,000 a year in your office job or your day job. And then you can take strength and conditioning gigs ad hoc as they come for a bit of extra revenue or a bit of a hobby, and whether that can be your hobby on the side. Because anecdotally, what I've seen and talking to a lot of people in the industry is you see a lot of strength and conditioning coaches that, work with the pro teams. They do it full time in their 20s, but then they come to their early 30s and realize that, I want to get a house, I want to have a family, and that their income from their strength and conditioning job is never going to be able to sustain that. And that's when they leave and either go into private practice or leave the industry completely. And that, I think we all know several people who have done that.
Very good. So we'll probably come back to that, but the other component of the survey was something that we've spent a bit of time discussing on previous episodes, which is basically how do these individuals get to the role that they attained. So let's talk about that for 2 minutes.
That was quite interesting. So I asked the people surveyed, how did you get into the current role you are in? And we have this thing anecdotally in sports science and strength and conditioning that we say nepotism is alive and well. If you have to apply for a job, you likely won't get it. A lot of jobs are sewn up. And I suppose every industry is subject to that. But now we have some hard data where 45% of the people I surveyed were recruited into their current role by a friend or a colleague. So they didn't see a job advertised and apply for it. They were actively sought out that a friend or someone they'd work with rang them up and said, look, there's a job going at this club, job going here. Do you want it? Only 29% of people got their job by applying for a publicly advertised position. So less than 1/3 of people saw a job advertised, applied for it and got it. So now you have a situation where these are the people that have found work, but less than 1/3 have actually did it through the normal means of applying, interview, securing the position. So as a prospective graduate, for me, that is it's harrowing to see that, okay, I'll apply for all these jobs, but unless I know someone, I'm likely not going to get the position, or I'm at less chance of getting that position. Now, flip that around. What does that mean from a pragmatic perspective? It means you can't be complacent during your studies. It means that you have to develop a strong network. And that is crucial. That's something I tell any students that I have the privilege of talking to this about. You need to build that network from day one. You need to start knowing people, start building good relationships. And this is where, as an undergrad student, volunteering for research studies, because a lot of people doing masters or PhDs are also coaches and go on to work in these organizations. So develop a relationship with them. Go get your experience volunteering in clubs, volunteering, shadowing, interning as an undergrad when you can afford to do this. That's where you build up these relationships. And also, never burn bridges. Strength and conditioning in sports science is a very small, highly interconnected industry. There's plenty of times where, someone will message me, do you know this guy? He just applied to work with us. He said he interned a couple of years ago in a place you were familiar with or you knew. And word gets around very quickly. So even if you're not happy in a position, always try to leave on amicable terms. And don't burn any bridges, because coaches move around a lot. Directors and managers move around a lot. The industry talks. Everyone knows each other. So the best thing you can do is, and one thing then, when you are cultivating a network like this, yes, people remember good practitioners in terms of, God, those guys were really good at using the GPS kit. Those guys could work all the technology, could write a good program. What people remember more than that is personalities and personable and interpersonal skills. So you can write the best programs of anyone, but in my opinion, writing a strength and conditioning program, that's a dime a dozen. You have so many people that can do that to the standard that is required. If you're an arsehole, that's what sticks out in people's memory. You know what I mean? You can be the best sports scientist, But if you're not a nice guy or a nice girl, that's what sticks out in people's memory. And that's the first thing people say. When people say, what's Arthur Lynch like? They don't say, first thing doesn't come, oh, he writes a killer program. It's, yeah, he's a nice guy. He's approachable. You can talk to him. That's the skills that you need to cultivate and be known for in your network, as well as being a really good practitioner and really good at your craft. But for me, that's a given. Anyone in this field should be really good at what to do. They should back up what they say they're able to do. But to really have longevity and success, I think you have to be a nice person then as well.
Right. So at this point now, what I suppose I want to discuss with you, David, is, so in the conversation with a prospective sports science student, someone considering a degree in sports science, or maybe they're a year or two into the degree and they're wondering about employment opportunities and the landscape there. Does this change the nature of the response that you give to them?
I think it does in certain ways, and it's still something I'm back and forth with in my own head. I'm still trying to, because I myself am a sports scientist, I'm a strength and conditioning coach. I've been lucky enough to, so far anyway, get by surviving with making my living from this area. But then again, I think survivorship bias is huge within sports science. That, you know what I mean? We tell people, oh, just keep going, keep plugging away and you'll get there. But for every one person that is able to make a career, hundreds, if not thousands, fall to the wayside before that. I think looking at the data, and especially the final element we talked about was the ratings of satisfaction. When I asked these people to rate how satisfied they were in their life, that wasn't great either. We had low ratings of satisfaction in terms of annual income, financial security, and job security. People on average were rating these well below 3 out of 5. We only had 3.3% give a 5 out of 5 for financial security, and only 14% give a 5 out of 5 for job security. You go then to the other side, you only had 4.5% of people give a 5 out of 5 for their quality of life, their satisfaction with their quality of life, and 12% for their work conditions. So what I am saying is, it is very difficult to get a job in this industry, it seems. Who you know is more important than what you know. You need to be able to cultivate a network from early on. If you're lucky enough to get into positions, you're likely not going to be happy in that position and you'll be looking for other positions. And if you have a job, you're probably not that well paid. And your ratings of satisfaction in income, job conditions, work conditions, quality of life are all poor. So on the surface, you're looking and you're asking, why would anyone go into this industry? And, there is the flip side, where I had a conversation with Mikey Kiley recently, and he did have a fresh perspective, where Mikey's a full-time strength and conditioning coach. He's also just completed his PhD. But, he said he's always worked. When S&C jobs were thin on the ground, he would work at anything. He worked on sites. He worked with a welding company, worked with a security company. And he's like, that gives you an appreciation of what real work is. He's like, when you're on a site where, he said, exactly thing he said to me, is like, the blocks are frozen together. Your hands are numb from holding a shovel in the icy cold, and you're shoveling dirt and cement in the winter. When you've done that for a while, then it makes you reframe whether strength and conditioning is real work. Yes, the hours might be long. He's like, they might be unsociable, but you're sitting down at a laptop for a few hours going through some data and spreadsheets. You're in the gym with the guys. You're out in the pitch. It's not hard work as such, but it is long hours. And he's like, so he sees it as a privilege being in there. So if that is your thing, if that is what you value most, and I suppose for the student, it comes down to, what do you value most? What do you want most from a career? Do you want money, financial security? Do you want a high annual income that you will live, you will easily live what you could class, say, a middle class or upper middle class lifestyle, where, you don't worry about money that much. You probably have a secure mortgage, have a nice little home, nice little family. And if that's your priority, fine. If though working in sport, being around that environment is more important, that you like to have that interaction with players and coach, and you don't mind the long hours because it's not the same level of graft. It's very day to day. You're doing this, doing that. If that's what you value more, then by all means, a strength and conditioner, sports science could be the job, but just you're doing that fully. I think that for me, I don't want students to have this pipe dream or illusion that, you're going to come out as a sports scientist, you're going to be shit hot. Premier League is going to want you. You're going to go straight in on 100K, driving around. That's not going to happen. If you get a job, you're more than likely going to be poorly paid, long hours, but it's a different type of job. So for me, I just think that students need to be fully informed of what the realities of the industry are. And then as fully informed adults, you make your own decision. Now, that being said, are there some advice I would give to students that can make that a bit easier? And I think yes. And another person who does a lot of great work in this area is Rob Pacey. And I chatted to Rob Pacey about this. I think it's true that students should become savvy in business then as well. And whether that is in addition doing some business courses, and become savvy in terms of the skills you develop, because there are some other transferable skills that a lot of students don't bother learning, but can generate multiple revenue streams for a strength and conditioning coach or sports scientist. And there are things like, if you can code, that seems to be a desirable skill that, as a data analysis, say working in sport, if you're working with the GPS side of stuff or the data monitoring, if you can code, you can start to create very efficient workflows. But also that skill, then you could work part-time with any company that requires coding or data analysis. If you get very good at that statistics, data analysis, and you're a good strength and conditioning coach or sports scientist, now you're very versatile. Now, if the likes of COVID comes up, you can seamlessly transition into another industry. You can get a part-time, short-term contract gigs with other industries to supplement your income. And I always think I would never rely on one company or one organization for all your income as a sports scientist, strength and conditioning coach, because you can lose your job very quickly. So I do think it's important to build multiple revenue streams, have money coming in from multiple different areas. The other area that I think people could serve well for students is graphic design, data presentation. You know what I mean? If you are able to take this data and visually represent it in ways that's easily digestible by the lay person, by sports managers, by directors, because a lot of the people you will work for in sport don't have a scientific background. So you give them data in kind of black and white cold data. They look at it, they don't know how to interpret it. You make it that it's very easy, they can very digestible, they can understand it quickly. One, you've made yourself a better practitioner in terms of now the coach or manager has seen you in a whole different light of value, because now you're not just producing these spreadsheets that the coach can't interpret. You're giving them actionable information that is very informative. And also that allows you then to transition to other areas. You know, if you look, sports tech is an area that I'm lucky enough to work in myself. These companies are looking for people that can create content, create graphics, but have an in-depth understanding of sports science, of strength and conditioning. So you can, if you're savvy, you can pick up some consulting work or some ad hoc work with these companies with content creation, data analysis, data representation. And that's very interesting. The other area for people that are considering careers in this industry, and I think I haven't spoke about this yet, I think is an emerging field. I think if you want to work in sports science, but also have all the perks of making quite a bit of money, having job security, I think there's going to be a nice little niche carved out in the future for sport and exercise science engineers. So I think if you can become either, I know NUIG Galway do sport and exercise engineering. If you become an engineer, technological engineer, but have in-depth knowledge of, strength and conditioning needs, sports science, now all of a sudden we've all these new technology companies that are coming up that want to create devices and technologies for data monitoring, for athlete training. This is an industry that's only going to grow and emerge and become bigger and bigger. Now you have a unique skill set because you have engineers that don't understand sport or sports science. You have sports scientists that don't understand engineering. If you can put yourself in the middle, now you're very valuable. You know how to design and build products, but you also understand the needs of the sport. You have insights into the sport, what coaches actually want. So you can develop features in products that are actually needed and desired on the ground. And I think that will be a new way of sports scientists. Sports science that can code, that can build devices, design devices. I think that could be a nice little niche that people, if that sparks your interest, you know, you want to work in sport, but you also don't want to go in with poor work conditions and money. That could be a nice little area that potentially could you could carve out a living for yourself. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, have I told you about my 5-second abs idea?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you about my 4-second abs.
No, but one thing I want to bring you back to, that you mentioned towards the start of that. So you brought up Rob Pacey and the interview that you did with him recently, which I quite enjoyed. And one of the things that stood out for me was, you know, so I suppose he's at one point he's trying to paint this picture of your undergraduate prospectus, and you come across your sports science listed within it, and there's an example student in there, and you know, of course they're going to be the person that was towards the top of the class and a nice hand-picked ambassador for them, you know. And when I think of even my own example, like early on in sports science, you know, we'd get these presentations about, you know, potential careers in sports science and stuff. And I just genuinely, like, to be blunt, I just feel as though we were lied to. And that's the thing that I would like to do here is, you know, we don't have to paint an overly bleak picture, but at least just be transparent and be like, look, this is the data are the data, you know, this is the landscape, this is how things are. Now we can, like, prospectively, there are things we can do to improve our chances here, or you know, ensure that, you know, for instance, getting in the door with places, like networking and knowing the right people are going to be crucially important there. There are things we can do to improve our outlook, you know. And I suppose that's sort of what I just wanted to get out of this whole conversation.
Yeah, like, again, the report I would have wrote on the website, like, I put a negative spin on it as such, but that, again, is marketing, and a bit of sensationalism is needed from time to time in order to get the engagement and reach. But I don't want to paint it all that negative. I rather would just, as you said, make it transparent. Say, look, you decide, here's the data. This is what the data says. This is what the employment landscape is like. Now, as a fully informed adult, you make your decision of how you go about that. Now, if you still want to pursue a career in this area, yes, there are stuff that you should pragmatically be doing from day one to enhance your chances. And that is, personally, and again, going back looking at our own class, I know you graduated a different year than I did, but I think there was 53 or 54 graduates in my year. I'd say there's a handful, at most 5 of us maybe, that still work within sports science areas, such as the kind of stereotypical what you would expect to do from graduating. There's only a handful of us that actually work in the area. So what can you do as a student to enhance your chances? So getting good grades, I think that is important. You know, just do well in college, be a good practitioner. You know what I mean? If you understand sports science, you should be able to get good grades. Like, I'm probably being a bit arrogant here, but it is not that hard to do well in a sports science degree, from my opinion. It if you're anyway interested and tuned on, you should be aiming for that first class. I don't see many reasons why you shouldn't be able to achieve that. But again, just because you get high grades doesn't mean you're going to have a success in this industry whatsoever. Experience is very important, and building the network. For me, I think experience in building the network is more important. So from day one, cultivate a network, cultivate relationships. That's, maybe I was a bit sociopathic as an undergrad, but that's what I did from day one. I was like, who do I need to get to know? Who's going to be useful to know down the line? So you do that through offer, and you do it through selflessness. It's not through, you know, saying, geez, those people are good, what can I take from them? What can I take? It's very much, you build these relationships by giving up your time and giving up your resources to help someone. If you offer to shadow someone, or to intern with someone, or to offer experience, there should be a net benefit by you being there. If you're just going in and like a Dementor of Harry Potter, you know, just sucking everything you can in, that's no good. You need to go in. How can I be of help? How can I help you? And, you know, suck it up for as an undergrad. It's probably putting out cones, putting out poles, doing the donkey work essentially. But you're getting in, you're getting to see the realities of the industry. You'd probably gain some experience, but more importantly, you've got network. You've 2 or 3 people who know you and know you have a good work ethic. And a couple of years down the line, when you apply for a job, like, oh, I remember those. You know, you make an impression. You can do that. So I think it's very actively be involved in interning experiences and what you can. And people say to me, "Oh, it's difficult." It's not. You go to any GA club in the country, any rugby club. The problem is people think too much of themselves too early. They think that they need to gain work experience with Munster rugby, with Leinster rugby. Yeah. No, you need to, if you want to develop as a coach, offer some strength and conditioning sessions to rural GA clubs. When you stand in front of 30 guys or girls of different sizes, shapes, skills, abilities, personalities, if you can communicate and coach in that setting, you can communicate and coach in any setting. So very much get onto any rugby club, any sporting organisation. They're looking for volunteers. You will be able to either coach or do some sports science or strength and conditioning. Any GA club, you're like, oh, I can do these data analysis. I'll record your games and do some data analysis. Do you mind if I do that? You know what I mean? Okay, you might get 1 or 2 clubs that reject it for some reason. You send out 10 emails, you're going to get 8 or 9 yeses, I'd say, to that. So the experience is there if you actively want to go and get it. So gain that experience, log that experience, have evidence of that experience. And, you know, that is, take pictures of yourself doing the job, take videos of yourself, keep a little diary of 2 hours data analysis. So you build up a large portfolio of this many hours done of GPS analysis, this many hours. Here's videos and pictures of me doing that. And, you know, because I think it's always important, and you can always look back and you will use those pictures and videos. You will use them at some point to promote yourself. So that is one thing I think is very important. Cultivate relationships, build a network, get the experience. Another thing that is trending at the moment is content creation. Offer to write a quick article or blog for a company or for an organization. And now you have a bit of an online presence. Now you've built up, okay, you're writing. Now these could be very basic blogs, but what they do is they force you to read the research, to get into the nuts and bolts, to create a document or content, and then that's used on the internet. So now all of a sudden is someone Googles your name in strength and conditioning and they go to LinkedIn, here's all your experience, you know, this GA club, 100 hours GPS analysis. Oh, this company endorses them. This company's allowed them to write with them. They must know their stuff. Throw in then you get your CSCS or UKSCA. Now you've the relevant qualifications. So now you're coming out as an undergraduate with a lot of experience, a large network, the relevant qualifications, and you're at a much better position to forge a career in this industry if you want than your peers. And what that also does is, if you decide maybe you don't want to go into professional sport, you want to go into private practice, you want to be essentially a personal trainer or strength and conditioning coach, open up a small facility, do one-to-one stuff, work with individuals. Now all of a sudden what you have as well through your undergrad, you have authority to market yourself online because you've wrote for these different people. You've built up, you've a lot of pictures and videos of you actually doing it. You've what we call social proof. So now from a business perspective, you've a lot of marketing material you can put out there. But through these experiences, what you've also had is, if you've worked with, say, 2 clubs a season for 4 years, what do you have? You've 30, 40 people per panel maybe you've worked with. Now you have 80 people per year over 4 years. You have 320 people that can vouch for you as a practitioner. You shoot those guys or girls an emails like, here, do you mind writing a brief description of what you taught of me as a coach, or a testimonial? If you get half of those people or even a quarter of those people to come back, you've upwards of 100 testimonials that you work as a freelance, like, look, this is my experience. I'm really qualified. I've worked with these people. Here's a load of marketing material of me working with these people. And this is what people I've worked with have said. Now, all of a sudden, if you want to go freelance, you have everything you need from a marketing and business perspective to forge a relatively successful career in that area.
Fantastic. I think that would be a good place to kind of start wrapping things up, and that was fantastic, David. I think you topped it off with some really nice, real practical advice for people as well to round it up.
I think so. And again, as we said, we wanted just to give people a glimpse of what the reality of the industry is, but also some tips on how to make, if you do want to try forge a career in this area, what are some of the things that you can go about to do that? Like I'm very much a person, I'm outspoken about how poor the standards in the industry are, how poor the work conditions are, and as a career choice, how poor it can be. But I don't like to be a person that complains and doesn't actively do anything about it. So giving people advice like this, I have a couple of projects in the pipeline that hopefully will be of benefit to people looking to gain and further career and experiences. So, stay tuned to Synapse for that. But then again, if anyone ever wants to message us and talk directly more about this, please feel free to do that, because it can be a great career, but just be fully aware of the realities of the industry. And people wonder, will it get any better? And if you understand basic economics, supply and demand, we supply way too many graduates, multiple times the number of graduates than there are paying positions. And it is a harsh reality of the industry that no matter what position you have, there's someone willing probably to do your job for free. So it's a hard industry to forge a living and to get the value. So I don't think things are going to change anytime soon. So if you do want to pursue this career, you need to get working from day one and build these relationships and forge these pragmatic tips that we have outlined here.
Excellent. And as always, with any Beyond Sports Science podcast episode, like, share, and subscribe. Got to get that in there. And I think that's the lot, David.
That's perfect. So if people are looking to contact you, Arthur, where is the best place to get you?
Well, if you prefer Instagram, No Lift Podcast, the best place to find me, all one word. You can also email me if you like, arthur@sigmanutrition.com. And that'll probably be the best place to find me.
Perfect. And if you are looking for me, synapseperformance.ie is my website. Synapse Performance is my personal Instagram. We recently launched an educational site, or a company account, that is only our educational content and none of my personal opinions or ramblings. So that's @synapse_education. And I'm always available on email, david@synapseperformance.ie.
Excellent. David, as always, it's been a pleasure. Thanks again for doing this.
Thank you, Arthur. A pleasure as always.